Okay, welcome. My name is Calene Van Noy, and I am here representing the grassroots New Conservative movement. And I am here with Randi von Bose, running for Kaysville City Council. And I'm excited to interview her. She's a friend and a neighbor and just a strong leader, and I am excited to see her in the City Council position. So as an introduction, she is a mother of 4 kids, and sorry, I lost my train of thought. Well, tell us a little bit about what you love in Kaysville. Let's go to that.
My husband and I have not lived in Utah for most of our married life. He's been doing medical training outside of the state, and so we have been in Texas. We've been in Kaysville for about 3 years now, and I think the thing that has been most remarkable for me is the sense of community here, that I know who my neighbors are, and I'm comfortable with my kids being outside, and that kind of environment still exists is wonderful, and something that I hope we can retain for many years to come.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing. Well, we are excited. The New Conservative movement has 5 core principles that we uphold, and I just wanted to review those before we got into questions. So first, we honor our Constitution. Second, we seek consensus-based legislation. Third, we work to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. Fourth, we endorse and support good leaders. And fifth, we demand fiscal discipline. And the New Conservative movement has endorsed Randi because she embodies these principles so well. So I wanted to start with one of the first principles, and that is about the Constitution. We need Constitution-minded people elected at the local level. So Randi, in what ways do City Council members uphold and follow the Constitution?
That's wonderful, thank you. I just wanted to, for real quick, give background. I was able to volunteer with Calene during this last election cycle for a national campaign for Evan McMullen, and I know that may put me in some people's positive columns and some people's negative columns, but for me it was a very positive experience because I felt like we had veered off course as a country where we were now in it for personal advancement more than we were upholding the foundations that make our country great. And I appreciated Evan as a person, but it was more the message underneath it, that there are foundations of our country that I think were inspired. And were they perfect? No. But there were things that laid the foundation for our country to be able to advance in such a quick and miraculous fashion. And I think it has provided the foundation so that our city can function in the same way. We have kind of a hierarchy, and I've been learning about a lot of history stuff lately, but there was a point where they had to make a choice between, do we want to have individual governments function on their own, or do we want to merge all into a national system? And the choice was made to merge into a national system, but still allow states to maintain their anonymity in a lot of things. And I think that's always going to be the debate is, do we want to give more power to a national level or to a state level or even down to the city level?
Balance of powers.
Yes, exactly, the balance of powers. But the miraculous thing in all of it is that we take that national government and we filter it down to a state level, and from the state we then get our charter here in the city. And it all flows into that same system that was set up on the national level. It all feeds into the same principles. And so when we abandon those foundations, the Constitution and the principles that were behind there, even our inalienable rights, we walk away from something that made us who we are today. And I think that anywhere from a city level up to a national level, it's important to remember those things that were fought for, and not just fought on a battlefield, but fought in rooms of politicians, really, but people who were trying to figure out what the best path would be. And it's just as important to us here in Kaysville as it is in Washington, D.C., because it all flows into the same big picture.
Yeah, so it's true. Well, I want to go right into another question of what does it mean to have a representative government?
That is also a good question. I wrote a blog about this recently just because it's come up through all of this campaign process where it's the political thing to say. I'm going to represent you and I'm going to fight for you, and what does that actually mean? And for me, it comes down to a philosophy that if we have just a group of elect people, of privileged people who are making legislation, it allows for negative influences to come in where those decisions become more about progressing positions of power than they do. Yes. And they become skewed, and we lose that foundation. And I think the reason that we were set up the way that we were is so that we can still take in the voice of the people, and we can still hear. And that's, I read a quote by, a good quote.
It's hard when you're on camera.
Okay.
You forget things. Just saying.
Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, who's the third author, Madison.
Yeah.
See, I should know that. Madison, in one of his Federalist papers, he wrote that the job of a representative is to take broad opinions and to listen to all of them and to be able to filter them down to what truly is needed. And that doesn't mean that whoever yells the loudest gets there. Yeah,
for sure.
You can't win by yelling the loudest, but there does have to be a balance between what the people want. And if I think that everything will function hunky-dory in one way, but the city feels differently, there has to be a way to meet in the middle. And that, to me, is what representative government is about, is finding out where that middle ground lies, to find out how to take this extreme voice and how to take this extreme voice and how to make it so that not everybody wins and not everybody is ecstatic about what they got out of it, but it's something that everybody can live with moving forward.
Okay, I've got to skip to another question because that just brings it in. In Kaysville, we've had some pretty differing opinions happen. And so what steps have you already taken and plan to take that will help improve communication between these differing opinions in Kaysville?
I think that it has to start with being open, and I know that that's easier said than done. I know that there have been people in our city for a long time now trying to meet in the middle, and after years of feeling like maybe they're not getting what they want, it's led to a lot of the loud voices and a lot of the...
So the frustration has just...
Yes, the frustration has escalated, and I understand that, and I am not trying to take away from the efforts that have been made, but I think sometimes having a new voice and having a new perspective allows a rejuvenation of that ideal of meeting in the middle. And there's going to be conflict, but there has to be personalities underneath the conflict that are willing to keep an open mind. And I think that's a big part of why I decided to run, is I have talked to people on both sides of the loud voices.
I know she has. I've seen it.
But and there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of anger coming from both directions, and I don't say that that's right or that's wrong. It's the reality for both sides. And until we're able to look at it and say, okay, I understand you're frustrated and I understand why, but we still have to function as a city. So how can we talk together, and how can I make you feel validated enough to make sure that we're still doing what's best for the city? And that's my goal, is to not push any one person into a corner and say, you know what, you're just too far out there for us. But to take that input and say, okay, maybe I don't agree with everything you're saying, but I do understand that there's a reason you're saying it. So let's figure out the underlying desires in that, and come to a place where we can move forward.
That is so great. So that makes me think of another question. So how do you get that communication out? How do you get city council meetings have been going for 4 hours at times?
Oh, I think there was
longer?
One for like 6.
I think that's too long. That's painful. No, that should not be allowed. So how do you get that underline and not have these really long city council meetings? How can you have that communication?
I think the city council meetings do become their own animal, and it's something I'm still trying to work through. My background, I did a lot of leadership through high school, which is like eons ago in my life, but it was something that I was good at. I was good at being a part of organized meetings because I understand the flow that needs to happen. When you have parliamentary procedure, there are rules in place. One of my personal favorites from back in the day was that comments had to alternate between somebody in favor of a decision and somebody against it, so that you didn't spend bulk of time just repeating comments over and over again and fighting the same tenant.
Right.
It's if everybody has made all the positive comments and we have no more negative, then we've exhausted our conversation. I don't know that that is something that could ever work in Kaysville, but I think there's an underlying tenet of needing to find that balance between, we can't be so heavy on one side of a conversation and only give a few minutes on the other, or vice versa. And if we have enough conversation, then let's move forward. Like, we all are in agreement, or we've had enough information to make our decisions. And so let's move forward in this conversation. And if we can't, then we table it and everybody does more research so that we can come back next time and make that efficient decision. And I think there's been a lot of comments about the new parliamentary procedure that was introduced. And that's the whole purpose of it, is so that you can filter all of these thoughts down and have an efficient meeting without having to get stuck in the weeds, which I think is what is happening a lot, is we're just getting stuck in the weeds trying to either have the last say or to prove our point. And at some point, we have to be able to move forward.
It's about moving forward.
Yeah.
Everybody wants that.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question. How do you balance infrastructure versus quality of life issues in Kaysville? And keep a balanced budget. I'll throw that in there. Let's just make it harder.
I think the balanced budget, actually, to me, that for Utahns in particular, that becomes our kind of bread and butter. We don't want to spend excesses that don't need to be spent. We're very much
frugal.
We are. And yes, that is our society, and it's wonderful, and it's amazing to live somewhere like that. And so I think when we're looking at the quality of life versus infrastructure, it has to be about priorities. And our society right now, infrastructure becomes a natural priority. It's not one that we have to really put that much thought into anymore, mostly because we have grown. Kaysville is now grown into a suburban area more than a rural area. And so in order to support a suburban lifestyle, we have to have roads, and we have to have all of the connections we need to get where we need to go, because that's just the world we live in. No matter how much we want to kick against the pricks and say, I wish I could just always live next to cows, which I think you do, but I guess I kind of do too.
Yeah, I've had a cow leaning up against our house one day.
There you go.
You know, it enjoyed the heat during the winter.
Yeah,
that's pretty rare.
Those are parts of Kaysville that I love. I love that ruralness, but at the same time, Utah's just growing, and people want to live here, and there's no way you can shut the doors on that.
That's true. Okay, then we've got to move on to our next question, because that's affordable housing. In Kaysville, we have really one spot that has affordable housing, one section of the town. And right now we are on the west side, where, would you say anybody says there's affordable housing on the west side?
No, and there isn't, because it was done on purpose. When our general plan was made in 2014, it was fought for it. The Planning Commission wanted to have quarter-acre lots or more affordable housing, but the neighbors, the citizens living on the west side did not. And
because of the rural, not because we want to block affordable housing. It was simply bigger lots, keep the rural feel. So what can we do about that? How can we create some affordable housing?
I have two takes on this, and one of them, well, they both come from people outside of my own sphere. I had a lady ask me recently about basement apartments and what the laws are in Kaysville, and she asked me, and I thought, well, I know this one. I know that if you have relatives, they can live in your basement, and if they're not relatives, then you need to get zoned for it. But the more I talked through it, the more I realized I'm not sure if that's actually what the law is. So I checked with the city, and it's actually much easier than I thought it was. Most of the houses in Kaysville are zoned as single family. So what that means is you can have any number of people that are related living in your house, so mother-in-law apartments, that sort of thing, or renting to your niece. That's absolutely allowed. Additionally, that zoning allows for 5 people who are not related to be living under the same house.
But it's 5.
It's 5.
That could be a problem in Utah.
Yes. I don't know, aren't we all related? That was, anyways, see, I mean, there's a connection somewhere, right? No, but it does kind of cause problems. That would be a solution for somebody who has, is maybe an older couple whose kids have all left the home and they want to rent out their basement to a young couple. That fits under the current zoning. Outside of that, there is a 2-dwelling zone that still fits into the residential zones and allows for 2 separate dwellings in the same house, but one of them has to now have a new address and a new mailbox. And so
some of that has to be put in.
Yes, so you can get zoned.
The cost would be somewhat high.
And you have to meet all of the safety standards. Once you have 2 housing zones, yes, then you have to meet all the safety standards. So those are kind of the options on the table right now, is that if you want to rent and you are going to have more than 5 people that are unrelated, you have to get it zoned. But I do think that in a lot of cases we're in that point in Kaysville where people have lived here, their kids have moved on, and now they have a whole basement and they're thinking, well, this would be a great way to make affordable housing so more people can come into our community. And in that scenario, it is allowed. And there are ways to still rent out your basement. It just becomes a little more complex if you don't fit into that scenario. But additionally, the city manager has been working through the affordable housing in the city, and his take on it is we can either do it by choice, or there is always the possibility that somebody can come in and force us to do it.
And they can.
And so really we have to make those decisions of, do we want to wait until they say this is where it's going to be and this is how it is, or do we want to take the steps proactively and make it happen? And I think, that would involve creating a new city plan, and since it was in 2014, we're probably due for a new one in the next year or so, and if in that new city plan we were able to talk about where we want that affordable housing to be, and nobody wants it in their backyard. I think that's something that everybody talks about, is like, I don't want to deal with it, but at the same time it makes our city better when we are able to see people who have different life experiences than us. And it can be hard and it can be challenging, but it also can be a great boon for the people. And I think that having a balance in that and making sure we're doing it on purpose is a great thing.
Yeah. And I just want to note, with the West Corridor coming in, I think that's smart. We need a new city plan, because that is that's in our backyard, and we need to know about that. Okay, let's move on to the roads. I was just talking about roads and I was thinking I covered it. No, we have some roads with serious problems. We got some big potholes and things. So we don't have enough budget for it. So how do you help these roads when you don't have enough money? What are some options that you see in our future?
I think the obvious answer that everyone hopes for up front is we need to just make sure that we're not spending money we don't need to be spending. Sometimes that comes down to hard choices, and it has to come down to priorities, and we have to ask hard questions, and some of the decisions are made for us. We have funds that come in for our parks that are mandated by state legislation, that we put this much money towards parks every year for upkeep, and we put this much money towards new parks, and that is something that goes back to the hierarchy. That's we have to do that because we function under the state charter, and so we don't have control of some of them, and really what's left over, there's not a whole lot we can do. We can cut salaries of some of the people working for us, but I've seen these people, they're already doing like the work of 3 people, so it's not as easy as it sounds. We need to still have good people running our city, and there has to be a balance in that. So when we look at it and realize there's no way to cut enough to account for what we need for roads, the roads are astronomical, and
they really are.
They are
so expensive.
But I think this current city council is working through solutions of looking at both creating a I think right now the common thought is to do a fee, and I know people have had contentions because fees aren't tax deductible, and fees are just a code word for a tax, and in Utah we hate the word tax. We feel like it's somebody taking our control away from us, and I understand that, but we also function as a city. We are a group, and we benefit from things as a group, and we have to be willing to see the perspective of making sure that we are
I think you're
Just a
back.
second. We're back.
Sorry.
We're good. The phone just rang, you know, that's
Anyways.
the technology. But I think, were you finished on the roads? You
I
kinda
think,
answered it.
yeah, I think we need fees. I think that if we look at bonding, we just have to make sure that we do it in a wise way. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, and not spend more than we need to, as always.
absolutely.
Okay. So I think we've about taken the time. Are there any other questions that you've had people ask you, or feel like there's anything that anyone listening or watching might want to know about?
I don't know. Hey, CJ, my husband's standing back there. Has anybody left any questions or anything as we've been going? You didn't see anything filter through?
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I think that everyone has a lot of the same concerns. How do we balance out our city with the needs without raising our taxes? And it's a complicated thing, and it is a hard thing. And I am not perfectly knowledgeable about everything. It's a learning process. I saw a quote this morning. Somebody posted it that said, "Make the mistakes you need to right now so that you can be successful sooner." And I feel
Oh,
like
nice.
I feel like
that.
that's what a lot of
That's
this
good.
campaign process is for me, is learning and taking in information. And my opinions aren't always right, and I have to go back and reevaluate. But I'm hoping to continue doing that so that when it comes down to crunch time, we can do it right and not continue to spin our wheels and not move forward.
Right, yeah. And Kaysville is a wonderful community, and I am sure that we'll create win-win situations, especially with people like you. So, really quick, to review our core principles as a grassroots new conservative movement, you know, Randy understands the founding fathers and how they created the Constitution, why they created it the way they did. Understanding history really helps us to move forward. She also understands, you know, how we can create consensus-based legislation. And that is really important in Kaysville right now. She also, you know, with the affordable housing and things, she will help us to work toward advanced diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Randy is a person of great character. Her family is an amazing family, a great contribution to her neighborhood, to the school. I see her down at the school helping. She's a wonderful person. And so we are so happy that we can endorse and support her. And finally, that we demand fiscal discipline. Randy completely understands that. And I hope you've noticed that as she's talked, how smart she is. And I don't say that lightly. She researches things. She understands things. Like she said, she's always had an interest in government. She knows how it works. And she wants to do the best for the community. She's invested in our community. And I just can't say enough good things. So obviously, I could go on and on.
Very sweet.
So I hope that you will take the time to vote for one. I think it might be close to 5 o'clock, so you have just a few minutes to mail your ballot for the primary for the mayoral candidate. That is not for the city council, but I just wanted to throw that in there. And I think close to 4,000 people have cast their vote, which is pretty good for Kaysville. I'm not sure it's the best that we've had, but it's pretty good high turnout. But I would like to see, you know, triple that, of course. So anyway, last question. Will there be another opportunity for Kaysville residents to get to know the candidates for mayor and the candidates for city council?
Yes, there will be another Meet the Candidates night sponsored by the League of Women Voters. That will be in October, and I don't know the date off the top of my head, but it's like mid-October.
So think of that in your mind, October. I am going to go to the Meet the Candidates event so that you can make a smart decision. You can do your part. America is a republic, representative government. It has the democratic institution of voting. Your vote counts. It makes the decision here in Kaysville. And the elections here in Kaysville, the city elections, are nonpartisan. You need to do your research, and you need to realize who would be the best candidate for the position. I look at all the candidates, and I can tell you all of them are good people. Who is the right one for right now? And I know Randy is. She has the time, she has the heart, the dedication, she has the support of her family and friends. And I plan to see you on city council. Just saying.
Thank you so much, Calene. You are awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate
It's been fun interviewing Randy, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.